Hi everyone, and welcome to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review. I'm Stephanie, and I've been collecting and selling vintage fashion magazines for over 20 years.
And I'm Morley. I'm a former copywriter and am now an award-winning playwright and screenwriter.
Together, we will examine some of your favorite vintage fashion magazines from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
On Uncovered, we'll discuss some of the magazine's models, layouts, and did I mention the models?
And we'll also review some of the ads and articles that make these magazines such a great piece of pop culture history. So, fasten your seatbelts and let's get uncovered. Today's guest is a pioneer in the fashion industry. She shattered barriers by being one of the first African-American models to appear on the cover of Vogue. In fact, she went on to appear on the cover multiple times. She has also appeared on the covers of Cosmopolitan, Essence, Ebony, Mademoiselle, and more. But today's guest is so much more than just a pretty face. Not only was she a leading model in the fashion industry, she has been and remains a cultural icon and role model. Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review is excited to welcome to our podcast, Peggy Dillard Toone.
Welcome.
Welcome, Peggy.
It's an honor to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps you could tell our listeners a little bit about your background, where you were born, where you grew up, etc.
Well, yes, I'm in my neck of the woods right now, South Carolina, upstate South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina is where I was born and raised and went through high school before I left on a scholarship to Pratt Institute in architecture because I was very interested in architecture. And I ended up graduating out of Pratt with more of an emphasis in fashion. Because I told my teachers that World Trade Center was going to fall. It was built like a chimney. And they said, if I were to graduate, I better take my little hot pants to fashion. So I said, no problem. I could do that too, because I like to lay bricks. So anyway, I love to design. I'm interior, exterior designer. I kind of look at it all as one continuous line, I guess I have to say, between fashion, food, architecture, life. I love to swim, so water is my thing, obviously. This is my bathtub. This is my office. And, so as long as I can keep that flow going, I don't get too bored. And I find a balance. I find it's very important to have that balance between home. And New York City was never a place I had a lot of relatives. So, outside of my husband being there, we've always spent a lot of time at home taking care of the elders in between work, jobs. In fact, recently, one of my nieces that, I feel like I've grown up with her said to me, who's all those people you keep posting on your Instagram page? And I said, that's your Aunt Peggy. And she's like, no, wait. I'm like, well, she couldn't connect the two, the same person playing soccer in the yard is the same person in these pictures.
That's nice.
She was never really quite interested. And she's a graduate of college, so I was like, but I realized why we had nothing to say when we're in the room unless we're online together. So I said, I got to get on this Instagram social media madness and, catch up with class a little bit. Cause I've been kind of lost in I went back to school when things got a little crazy in the fashion industry and everybody was, it was like the supermodeldom thing had just kind of gotten overrated, I thought, because in the meantime, the stock market had crashed, you still couldn't pay your rent. Right. A lot of things were going on in the economy. And just to be saying that you're walking the runways of Paris, it was more important to me to put a roof over my head. So I headed north. My husband and I headed to Harlem. We opened a hair salon for 10 years. Employed, gave jobs to 15 people. And that was our family until we sold it. It has sold twice since then. It was very successful, but we were one of the first, I would say, full service Black hair salons. We did everything from naturals to relaxers, chemicals, but formerly one of the first Aveda concept salons above 96th Street. So I sold a lot of products for them. And then before that, the precursor to that was before I had the runways of Paris. What a lot of people didn't know was I was still in college at Pratt, and I went on this audition. I was hungry, and it was for Vacherette lingerie, and very utilitarian line, which was cool because they wanted to shoot commercials in Japan after the first time they did it in New York. I went on an audition. We shot the commercial. They were very excited that I wanted to eat sushi instead of hamburgers for lunch. But I was taking a course at Pratt in Asian culture. So, I figured what better time to get really involved. And, and I had all these questions and I was just, like drilling them on raku pottery and all this. So they remembered this. And when they went back and the commercial was a hit, they gave me a 6-year contract, which was one of the first contracts really ever, at that time, they really didn't offer Black women contracts in America.
Really, yeah. And when was that? When was that?
This was like 79, 80. Well, I did it for 6 years. We'll put it like that, right at the turn of, 70s, 80s. And they were all TV commercials. They would run on Sunday night, an hour before the Sunday night movies. And, their commercials are sort of like Super Bowl all the time, every weekend commercials. So they would fly me in. I might have to learn to play pool for a whole month so that they could shoot me in a clear pool table with neon balls and my hair blown out in a long line bra and girdle, looking like Superfly pool lady, I mean, the commercials were always a little eccentric, never over the edge because it was still family hour. But it was the first time you would see a body, lingerie on a body. Until that time, it had always been on a form in America.
Right.
But I was still in college. That was my junior year. And the beauty of that is they helped me to get my first distribution, which was beautiful. All the makeup brushes and all the accessories I used to sell to Mac, and I would sell to Sandy Lintner and everybody.
Really?
So I was the first one to import what most people later saw as the line at Shuramuru. He bought my distribution. And so from 17 up until about 24, 25, I was like, the trade secrets brush lady. Wow. I would take my brushes into Vogue and I was like, oh, these are so fabulous. I just saw them in Japan. And so I never bought an ad. I was very successful. I was in all the department stores, better pharmacies. And so I've always kept it kind of a foot in both sides of the business, in the back end as well as the front end and supplying and, with the hair service. We did Apollo Theater. We did a lot of work, really.
Wow.
I trained all my hairdressers to be editorial hairdressers. So we had a lot of credits.
Wow. So how did you start? Did you always know that you wanted to be a model?
I think I always knew that I could be because, it was in the back of my mind because my mother made all my clothes. So I was modeling for her all the time. And she taught me to sew. I had my first line for full figure women that were over 300 pounds when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
So I wasn't intimidated by it. It was all around me. My mom and I would, transform patterns. And she was really great at all of that. My grandfather had been a tailor. So it kind of ran in the family. There was always sewing around. And my mom made costumes for the theater, and the ballet. And so it was not unusual for us to have this trunk in the basement and be playing in these costumes out in the yard. And people would say, we love passing by your house because your kids are always having so much fun. But we had this trunk of costumes that my mom made and, beauty gowns and all kinds of stuff. She would make like the gowns for all the girls at the high school when it was their cotillion time, things like this. So I grew up with this phenomenal mother that knew how to do a lot of different things and who demanded that you did. I was her last child, the youngest of 13. Wow. So she was determined to give me, I guess, what she couldn't get into the rest of them. I went to work with her every day and I just loved it because we were best friends. And she had a catering business. So she taught me, that there in life, you try to learn techniques. You further yourself by continuing your education and being intrigued to learn how to do the things that you like, make the foods that you like to eat, make the dresses that you like to wear.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I thought that the designers wanted me to wear their clothes. And when I started buying their clothes and wearing it to work, they would always say, oh, no. Wear those crazy outfits that you make. Don't wear our clothes. Because I've always traveled the world on my own and bought fabrics. And one of my favorite jobs in high school was for Far Eastern imports. And there I met a lot of designers. I knew all about the fabrics. And, little did I know at that moment that later I'd be working for the same designers, that I was servicing at Far Eastern. But it gave me an opportunity to learn about a lot of fabrics and later go to the countries where it was made and just have such an appreciation for the cultures that all of this would come from.
So as someone who is into fabrics, what do you think of poplin?
Of what?
So what do you think of
Say
poplin?
that again?
What do you think of the fabric of poplin? We've discussed poplin numerous times. I've never
on
heard
the
it.
podcast.
I thought it was a word that Stephanie made up.
Morley
But-
thinks
I
I
think
made up.
as they say to everything, there's a season.
Mhm.
I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay.
I was the kind of kid, I didn't like Rick Racks. So okay, what can I say? All right.
How did you start working at Vogue magazine? How were you discovered?
Well, I had been doing projects for school. So I was running in and out of the 550 building and to different designers trying to borrow clothes to put in fashion shows that I was producing for school. And I met Ralph Lauren and he said, oh no, try the clothes on. I was like, I got to try it on. He says,
Wow.
just try it on. So next thing I know, I'm working in his showroom when he first started his active sportswear line. And I love to play tennis. So, I was all in my glory there. And he gave me a break. I was still a student. And I just started, hanging out there really in the 550 building. Next thing I know, I'm meeting Scott Barry and all the Black designers, and who I didn't meet there, I would meet at my brother's gay speakeasy. And him and his lover, who was Lester Hyatt, who worked for Giorgio di Sant'Angelo,
Oh, wow.
was determined to introduce me to the fashion scene. So between him and my brother, that's where I got to go to the parties and be kind of ushered into the business. So, but there was always this thing to go to school, have something to fall back on, make sure that you use all of your talents. And I wanted to know how to sell anything. So I put myself on a shelf and I said, how will I sell this product? I was like, she's just not exactly the thinnest. She's not exactly the, what can you do? And I knew that I was a gymnast. I knew I could walk a straight line and a dancer. And so I tried to just forget about my flaws, even though they were like, boom, boom, boom. I was just saying, okay, but right now you broke, what can you do? What do you have to offer here? And so I started booking shows throughout the 550 building on my own. And that's when I met Ellen Harth, who had a runway agency, and she came up to me and she's like, oh, you got to have an agent. And at first I didn't want an agent because I was like, why should I give them any of my money? So,
Yeah.
Later Eileen Ford was calling me, but by this time I had signed with Ellen because she did have the best, she had all the girls. And the designers were like, if you really want to work with Ellen. So she was really like a den mother, godmother, everything, German, battle axe kind of person who I felt really defended her girls. And being that I was in college and young and, I was just thrown into the industry. I think Beverly Johnson said it best in her book that she wrote. Because while she was lost in Studio 54 for days, here I was, opportunity met, necessity, because I needed money. I needed a job.
Mhm.
And I just happened to walk into Ellen Harf's. I met Deirdre, her top booker, who took care of me like, I can't tell you, like a baby. Next, I thought everyone was working as much as I was. I was hitting, like all the little, at that time, the shows were being given in the showrooms. And because they knew I was there, you know, it's about being on the scene a little bit too, and being seen. So a big part of it, I felt like I kind of started on my own, but I had a lot of support from the right people when I didn't even have an agent. Scott Barry would use me for everything, his programs, and even Ralph Lauren. Every time Women's Wear Daily came into his showroom, he would have me shoot all the papers.
Wow.
And this was before I even had an agent. So it's like photographers. I tell girls, you can't always wait for the photographer to discover you. I would take those magazines and I would do it like I was doing an art project and put every photographer in a folder. Then I would look at them, study them, and I might get dressed up and go knock on Mr.
Wow.
Elga's door. And I would role play. And I'd be like, who are you? And I would like, I'm the girl in your next pictures, you know, and I would dress up. And I would just like, you know, I was silly. I tried to have fun with it, you know, and I love hats. So I was always wearing these hats, you know, and big hats. And it was like, oh, okay, she's a little eccentric, but they then start to ask for you. So when you get an agent and people are requesting you, so I was on a roll. It was very, I would almost say serendipitous in the beginning because I really was on a roll, and I seemed like I was the last to know it in a way. I was going so fast. By the time I'm in my junior year, I've got my first Vogue cover.
Wow.
And I'm flying back and forth to Japan. I'm selling camera equipment on the side. I'm selling brushes on the side. Not on the
really
side. It was officially my first company. And I would have to say Mr. Takashimaya that owned Vassarette and owned you know, like better pharmacies and department stores, was like my godfather. He's like, what do you want to do? I see you love art, and I love kabuki theater, so I could always get the best tickets to the kabuki theater. And I was just like, I want to paint like the kabuki, you know. And he's like, well, I said, the brushes. He said, you want the brushes? And I was like, yeah. And it was just like that, even, you know, that next thing I know, I'm setting up a distribution to a business that ended up hiring women from South Africa to Hawaii, direct sales. And in every better pharmacy, every department store, and no one knew it was mine.
Amazing.
So then I sold that business. Like I said, I sold the distribution, and, you know, I moved on with my hair salon, and we got that license with the state for natural hair care, which set it up for a lot of people to open salons and do services they had never done. So, you know, I sold that at the right time when all these little shops started opening all over Harlem, and moved on. And I'm more involved now in locations with movies, and I know Harlem like the back of my hand, you know, photography and my artwork. You know, the art is, we rent out artwork to the film locations that are not only in our home, Brownstone in Harlem, but you know, we do shoots here. This is all part of our circus.
So perhaps you can tell me about something then. I know that you have an IMDb credit. You worked on a movie called Alma's Rainbow as a production designer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, that was my first bite of the cheese. It was arduous because who does a movie in their own house in August for 4 weeks with no AC?
Oh my!
5 scorpions on set, including myself. It was wild. It was like people were getting fired left and right. It wasn't intended for me to be the production designer. I ended up doing so much work they couldn't help but credit me, and so that's how that really came about. The lady whose life it was about, everyone seemed to know her but me. But it was just a crazy kind of situation, because later I realized why even they picked me, you know, but that's another story. In general, it was a great experience. I felt like I not only cut my teeth on that, it's like I jumped hoops, and I had to learn how to control. Overnight, I grew into a producer and someone who knew how to work with any producer.
Right.
and get what I need to get, the picture in the can, but also not be taken advantage of.
Right. So,
So
speaking of which, you are, again, we've mentioned a role model and you are a pioneer in many ways. Do you feel that perhaps you could relate in some ways to what Jackie Robinson went through earlier in his career? Or is that too much of a stretch?
yeah, definitely. I mean, you have your moments. I guess we all have these ideal kind of ways we look at, like Paris, for instance, or Europe, and our expectations, and then getting there and being met with, signs in the window that say, "Oh no, complete." All of a sudden, we're full, and and you find yourself sleeping in a whorehouse overnight. There's always, I guess the best way I say this to kids now is never be so naive to think that you're not in the world of worlds. Once you step out of your door, you're a victim to everything that anybody else can be a victim to. And just because you're pretty, I think it makes you more of a target. And you have to, that's where I credit my brother. He was a sociologist and psychiatrist, and the kind of person that prepped me for the world. I had been to clubs, I had seen things, by college that most people hadn't seen when they went to Studio 54. So none of that fazed me. It
Right.
didn't really faze me, And when it came to a Vogue editor standing there, fixing my clothes and saying, "Oh, I wonder how many bales of cotton your grandmother picked for you to make a dress like this." I would just, I don't know what happened very early on in my life, very, very early on. I think I must have felt something through my father, who was mixed, and through being with him most of the time when he would take me to work. He was the manager of the laundry room at Shriners Hospital for Children. So I would go there and play all the time and hang out with him. And it was a certain air and a certain way he was treated, because he wouldn't accept that kind of
Right.
treatment from anyone. So it was something that was learned, and it was almost, I don't know any better way to say it, because I can be so country and so simple that people just think that. But when I go to my Downton Abbey side, they're always surprised, But it's like, my grandmother always said, when someone raises their nose at you, you just raise yours a little higher.
Yeah.
And don't forget you're taller.
So,
She said, "Don't forget you're not taller."
someone who,
But I had those kind of roots. Coming from South Carolina, my mother put us in a school, and we integrated schools when I was in the seventh grade. So I went through what we call junior high, then 7th, 8th, 9th grade in a school with 8 Blacks.
Oh, wow.
Up until the last year. And so that was when I really, I guess, took the training wheels off. And my mother said, "Look, if you're going to go through life, do it on your own terms." She said, "And don't join any factions." She said, "Learn to walk down the middle of the road."
Right.
And that has always been in the back of my mind in terms of choices that I would make. And just not really, I think people misinterpreted it as me being antisocial, homophobic, all kind of things, they want to call it sometimes, because I would just be to myself.
Right.
And, my way of getting through the day, which they didn't know, is I would be in high tantric yoga mode. And, and I didn't see nothing around me. I didn't even remember what I wore 2 hours ago. It was going so fast. I was just in my, like, here I am, goddess of Shiva, love me. So, people were like, "Who is she? And where does she come from? And what does she think she is?"
So,
And, it takes later on people, laughing about it and telling me, who were in the same room with me, what they were really saying and thinking. And I have to crack up, because they're like, "You're really not what we like." I was like, "Girl, I was doing somersaults down the middle of the floor,
that's awesome.
It's like,
So, someone who I admired, who was a role model for many, for me as a comedian and for others as a Black role model, was Dick Gregory. I don't know if you knew him.
Oh, I met Dick Gregory. He was a buddy of mine.
So he was a great guy. I met him one time too, but one of his stories, which for our listeners who don't know how he combated racism, is early in his career, he went to a restaurant somewhere in the South with some people he was performing with.
Mhm.
And the waitress said, "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't serve colored people here." And he said, "Well, that's okay. I don't eat colored people." Perfect response from a genius.
Oh God, you make me think of my grandmother, who she worked for this white family and they called her grandma too. And right up to when she died, they're sitting on the front row with us. And yet when I would go to their house as a little girl, my mom dropped me off a couple of times, emergency, and my grandmother said, "No, you have to stay in the kitchen. You can't go out and play with the other kids." And I couldn't understand why. I was like, "But why? And why are you peeling their grapes, taking the seeds out of them? You don't do mine like that." It's just like, it's the first time she really kind of looked at me. I mean, she was always this lady that laughed and was full of joy. And she said, "Do you think I look like I am having fun doing this? Like, this is pleasure." And it was like, it stuck through me like a knife as a little girl, the humiliation and what she had to go through to be there. And yet I couldn't even go play with their kids. And so I was always aware. And it didn't make me fearful like it made a lot of people around me, other kids my age. I remember I was taking Latin in 7th grade, and I would just say, "As long as this bitch puts the A on my paper, I don't care. Because Miss Lee is never going to call on me. I don't care how many times I raise my hand in Latin." Okay, I was the only one with the answer. And so, I learned to just kind of do my thing and just kind of roll through it. I would take the road of least resistance, as I tell people.
Yeah.
And I just say, "Put the A on my paper." And I would just do it quietly. But what got me through it all was, I guess, gymnastics. And the discipline of having something else. Gymnastics and tennis were my passions, and having that sport to keep me grounded. I had one best friend, and that's what we did together. We played tennis, then I'd go for gymnastics. So by high school, I had, I graduated early, really a year early, because I had credits from junior high. And I was so not interested in high school, to be honest with you. I could have used those 2 years and gone on about my business, which basically is what I did. When I got to Pratt, I was there a year early. And they called me jailbait, and everybody's like, "Who's this kid?" So, that in itself was like many things. But I remember doing my first concert. I said, "I'm going to produce some concerts." And they were like, I'm going to get Patti LaBelle. So when I got Patti LaBelle and she came and did, they were like, "You really did do that, didn't you?" So, this guy told me, he says, "I was thinking about dating you, but I didn't even try because you were just jumping hoops over us." I was like, I didn't have time for dating. I was doing things, So I really enjoyed just the experience of learning all of these different things, because Pratt was like a school. It was a technical school that you could go from A to Z, you left to right, And I being as young as I was, my mother said, "Okay, load up on credit so you stay out of trouble."
Smart.
And that was basically my life. So by the time I was in my second year, I had a job, and I worked for the Army Navy resale. I would take a bus way out to the other side of Brooklyn, where I had a whole big old hangar as my office, 2 assistants, and I would just erect displays for the Army Navy resale stores around the world and draw the diagrams with them. So that was, one of my other eccentric jobs. So I was doing all these, and then my other job that I think led into modeling just before that is I was doing illustrations for Jack Braunstein catalog company, and you work over a light box. I can illustrate without all of that, but this stuff was just so tedious. I said, one day I was looking at the lights. I said, I need to be the girl in this picture. I need to do this. So I think that helped as far as modeling went, from drawing all these poses and seeing women in these poses, buying patterns. It adds up to, okay, in front of the camera, you kind of know how to merchandise an outfit, because most girls think it's because they're pretty, or they don't understand that they're hired to sell a garment. I tell the little girls, I'm like, I'm not your role model. I'm a fashion model.
Right.
Make sure we don't get that confused,
So Peggy, you got to come clean with this. I know, I've heard that Patti LaBelle always keeps a bottle of hot sauce in her purse. Did she share any of her hot sauce with you?
No, this was so early on. She was still Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, but she did come and treated me just as sweet as she could. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of money to pay her, but she came and gave us like 5 hours of pure entertainment
Oh,
Okay.
and
nice.
total drama, you know, just like a full performance, you know, and made me feel like a rock star, you could imagine. But I got to personally take care of her, and she's just as sweet as she, you know, as you've ever seen in person. She's all that.
Well, any woman who likes hot sauce and keeps a bottle in her purse is great in my books.
See, I'm the only hot sauce I really eat is my own.
Ah,
I make hot sauce, I make salsa, I make all
oh,
kinds of
yum.
stuff.
So when are we
Yeah.
coming over, Peggy? Sorry.
Hi.
Peggy,
That's what I do. I feed my friends and family all the time.
Peggy, I'm hearing that there's not much that you haven't done.
That's not true.
I did read,
It's relative.
there's a point to this. I did read that you refused to model for chemical hair straighteners. Is that true?
Yes, I did that because when I was younger, I used to have hair down in my waist. So my sister Erlene had a beauty parlor, and she put some of that Ultra Street, you know, extra light, relax in my hair. And I hated the way it felt. I hated the way it just was. And I just cut it all off one day, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that again. So in the process of going back out, because I had always done my own hair since I was about in second grade. I had the kind of hair that if I let my sister Kitty could do it, she would cut half off. So, you know, I learned to get it together, and I just wore 2 like braids, like a little squat all the time. And so yeah, after that, I played with shapes and textures, and just, you know, got used to it being just being, sometimes not doing anything other than just liking it being clean. And being a swimmer, being someone in sports, I really felt that had to be my priority. So I had to, you know, relax my mind, because I think a lot of us are super uptight about that. We won't go jump in water because we don't want to get our hair wet, you know.
Nobody I know.
Or we don't want to go to work because we're uptight about our hair. So I, not that I haven't had my own hair woes, but yeah, no, you know, we were blessed to have a lot of hair in our family. And my oldest sister, Erlene, was a top cosmetologist in South Carolina State.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up doing hair in her hair salon. So I could do my own hair. And most times on jobs, they would expect me to do my own hair. I mean, the Vogue cover, believe me, everyone thinks that was like a plan, like, oh, let's put Peggy on Vogue and an afro. No. I got there, and the dresser says, I've never done anybody's hair like this before. What do I do? I said, oh God, this is the Vogue cover. I said, tell you what, you go to the kitchen. We were at Albert Weiss's. I said, I know they got some olive oil down here. I said, you go get the olive oil. I'm going to go in the bathroom. I put my head under the faucet and put all the olive oil in it. He's like, that is amazing. That is amazing.
Wow.
He never even touched it. He was just like, oh yes, that's it. So it's not even about getting so caught up. I say to people sometimes, because sometimes you can't even see the hair, you just see the shape, you see it in the shadows, you see, you know, it's all about, it's the magic of it to me. It's not about just me. And as Bobby Flay told me when he was cooking in my kitchen with me, it's not about your hair. It's 7 o'clock in the morning.
We love Bobby Flay.
I said, okay, Mr. Flay, you're in my kitchen. Don't forget though.
Wow.
Wow.
And not my hair kitchen.
Well, now we know who beat Bobby Flay.
Well, I did actually. I think I did the first competition with him on air, food competition, and it was cornbread dressing.
Wow.
And he kept saying cornbread stuffing. And I said, Bobby, I'm here to teach you, baby. There's cornbread dressing. We dressed the outside, we stuffed the inside. So I taught him how to make cornbread, and he did his, I did mine. And it was like a competition that just came about online. And they said it was the first time they'd ever had.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So they offered me a show like right after, but I wasn't ready for all that. I was like, I don't even have a restaurant, you know. And y'all had me buy all these ingredients. Bobby Flay didn't buy anything.
Oh, you know what, Peggy? If you had that show, we would be watching it every day because we watch Beat
Every
Bobby
episode,
Flay.
every episode.
We watch.
Well, it's
I'll
never
put-
too late. I tell you that. I'm really trying to shop a series right now that would involve cooking too. So keep your fingers crossed.
Oh,
We'd love to watch because I'm addicted, especially me, to cooking shows.
Yeah, keep us posted for sure.
No, they're the best. That's all. My dog, we watch him all the time. My husband, we're big cooking. I mean, God, Lydia and all. I mean,
Yeah, Lydia's Kitchen. Yeah.
Food Science Kitchen. I mean, you
Yeah.
learn so much. You can learn so much now.
Especially the food.
I'm like, God, we got the world in our hand. If you don't even know how to make a cake, I've become a master lemon cake maker with, my phone in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm fascinated. I am enthusiastic about life.
Yeah.
I've just recuperated from shoulder surgery.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry to hear that.
wow.
Yeah, major rotator cuff, so I'm back to
This is how
here.
you feeling. How's your serve?
I'm back to swimming. That's what we go try to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all of our listeners,
Yeah, no, the doctor said you better do
Peggy's
it
doing
now.
some calisthenics for us.
Huh? Oh yeah. I'm
Yeah,
elbowing my
good.
husband all night long, like boom, boom, boom.
Peggy, so you mentioned a few people that you worked with, Albert Watson, Sandy Linter. I know that you've worked with Anthony Barboza.
Yes, I have.
I think you call him Tony.
Tony Barbosa, yes. That's
Sandy's actually the one who recommended that we reach out to you. So thanks to Sandy.
Thanks, Sandy. We
Oh,
love Sandy.
such a little young girl when I first met Sandy. And she was so sweet. At that time, it was rare to find a woman doing your makeup. And it was just always such a pleasure because you would feel like you were getting a facial, when she was doing it, as opposed to the guys who would take that makeup brush and just kind of grind it into your skin, and you'd be like, whoa, we're not painting and spackling walls here. But yeah, I just love working with Sandy. We all bonded so much. And our trips back then were so different when you were working on film. And we would love when we had to reshoot and go back again. We'd be like, yeah, let's reshoot, let it rain. We want to stay a few more days. But it was just a different world back then. And everyone was somewhat supportive because, photographers were a little eccentric then. They were always thinking they had to have you walk on the edge, walk on the edge of the world kind of thing. And, now these girls can just do a little pose. Then you had to practically cut somersaults down the runway. It was really I hated sometimes that I had become known for, being someone that could move well, because at the end of the day, I was like, they need to be paying me more because these girls are standing over here posing and they want me to do this whole routine, But it was cool. The Japanese really took great care of me, even when, I didn't know anything about the world and they could have easily ripped me off. The stories about them giving you bags of cash and all that, it's all true. But, they would stash it in my Swiss bank account and things like that. They'd be like, oh, we put some Swiss bank account. And I was like, no Swiss bank account. Oh, you have Swiss bank account now. And later years, later when the world is crashing in and you're thinking, hey, well, I got some money somewhere in Switzerland. Let me go get it. It really, like I said, I was being ushered through the world, and I just felt like I had to be a guest in it, that I didn't want to get too familiar anywhere I went. And there was times I'd be in 4 and 5 countries within, a week.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, let me just hit it like my feet aren't hitting the ground. I really did have that feeling at times, as though I was running and my feet just weren't quite touching the ground,
Amazing. So Peggy, everyone's heard of Tyra Banks, Naomi Campbell, Tyson Beckford, but do you think that there's enough inclusivity when it comes to models of color?
Well, I think that there's never enough in some areas. I mean, we're seeing African models, dark chocolate, quite prevalent right now. So it's not like we don't see them. I think the problem will always be in terms of us making a living and having a career. Do I see you in the advertising pages? Do you see me in the advertising pages? Because to this day, a Vogue cover doesn't pay but $200 some, you know? And that's where I think people are a little misguided. There will always be those people. I remember when Naomi did a whole campaign for Fendi once, and they sent all these beautiful posters out to Inglewood, New Jersey. And the owners of the shops were like, are you crazy? We're not going to put these in our windows, you know? And it is what it is. If you don't want me to wear your clothes, if you don't want people looking, I'm not going to beg you to wear them. I'm not going to beg you to buy them. So I think we have choices. And I personally, since they haven't been calling me lately, I wear my neighbor's clothes. I wear, you know, Black designers. I've been doing shoots. Actually, I just did one with James Hicks, where in the middle of the pandemic, we were just like, okay, what can we do? And I said, well, you know, James and I got together and we said, let's do a campaign toward Black designers. And we started, and you could go on his Instagram page, James Hicks, to photography 2 or something like that, and see just the amazing work that he's been able to spit out in just a year by going, and he's such a great conceptualist, stylist, everything. He doesn't make a big deal of it, but he has this chest of designers that he could just pull from. Like, oh yeah, let's do this idea. I got this girl, you know. And so he's been connecting. I think the other part of this is the market. The market, you have an Atlanta market, you have a New York market, LA market. And in all these markets, I see more diversity. Okay. I just think that we too have to, we have to represent the people that wear your clothes. You know, there are people, there are even Black designers who think they have to use a certain look to sell their clothes. But in the end, they may only be selling to Black people. So it's just, you know, I don't think anybody should get so caught up right now. I'm just kind of like in that let it be mode, and it'll work its way out, because Instagram is going to help us work it all out. Instagram has got people making things and doing things that we've never done before, a different way of marketing, a different way. So I'm very excited about the fact that we can all take our artwork, put it on a shirt,
Yes.
put it on a sneaker. I mean, I am just like looking at kids that are, you know, teenagers banking 40 grand a week, a month. And I'm like, well, okay, I got a lot to learn here, you know? So I'm open to learning. I'm open to, I guess, the next chapter, because somehow we have to put all this stuff we've learned in, instead of being tentacles going in different directions. I do feel that I have a talent for directing and producing and getting stories down, and stories in the can that can enrich our life, you know?
Well, I have a couple screenplays I can send you, and if you can get those produced, no
Send
problem.
me your screenplays, darling. I will do everything I can. You know, I know everyone.
He's very talented.
I would love to read your work. I would love to.
I'll be happy to send them to you.
You could write me a role, you know.
As a matter of fact, you could play the role of the mother in one of them.
Okay. I could be a mother.
It used to be called A Mile in a Soul. It's about a homeless person who scams people. It's a dark comedy, and eventually he's looking for his long lost father, and eventually ends up on the streets. So anyway, yeah, you can definitely play the mother.
Sounds very real these days. Yeah, I could do that.
Sure, I'll be happy to send it to you.
I can play from high to low.
Well, this would
I
be
prefer to play high. No, I'm joking.
for Studio 54.
Now, Studio 54, I mean, I have my moments. I remember Janice Dickinson debuting there, and I got mad at them early on because I took Peebo Bryson there one night, and they wouldn't let him in. They thought he was a clodhopper. So I never went back. They saved me. he saved me, really. I was like, how did they were like, you can come in, but your friend can't. And I was like, you know what? I could dance at
Good for
home.
you.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance. What's a clodhopper?
Who?
You said they thought he was a clodhopper?
Yeah, you know, a southern. Well, he had on a polyester kind of plaid suit that was maybe a little dated, but yeah.
Their loss.
And you know, he's this short with at that time he had a little fro, and it was their loss. Yeah, it was good. Neither one of us needed that at that moment. So I was rarely in town, to be honest with you. I had started traveling a lot, and that whole scene, Sandy and all of them got caught. I just always had this philosophy that if you play, you can't work. You know,
Yeah.
you have to decide which one you're gonna do. And my broke ass had to work. Okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had other businesses that nobody knew about.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I had 4 salesmen. I had 4 Jewish salesmen at one
Wow.
point in this company. I was responsible to a lot of people. So yeah, in the dressing room and stuff, I would be doing my work. A lot of times people were trying to, get your attention or whatever. And I'd be like, call me when you're ready to put the dress on it, just, you call me. But until then, I'm busy. So
Mhm.
I was always, as my mother would say, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. You know, you have to keep working for yourself.
Yeah.
You have to keep building something. And the Harlem part was, we thought to go there at a time no one else wanted to go for space.
Hmm.
And also wanted to be surrounded by more people because, it was very colorful. And most of them that I was meeting were from the South, or the West Indies. So I felt very, in a way, at home because prejudice doesn't come in the industry all the time. It could just come from your neighbors living downtown.
Sure.
I remember my neighbors complaining that I was playing my music too loud. And I was able to take my receipts to the landlord and go, well, how could I do that if I was in Japan? Don't you see right here that I was not even in the country?
That's
So,
ridiculous.
I was just tired of I grew up in a place like this where, you could see the sun rise and set and peace of mind.
Yeah.
And Harlem gave me that. It gave me a backyard to sit in. It gave me space to be an artist. And, my husband and I could have our own floor if we needed it. Not that I asked to buy a building with 13 tenants in it, a rooming house, not knowing what I was getting into.
Wow.
So Alma's Rainbow came about right after we had gotten the house emptied in a way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a lot of people like Malik Yorb and all of them did their first productions ever there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we became a production house immediately. And then it became the Wild Wild West with producers showing up, wanting to do locations and no contracts. And so it got to be really tough titty time, and me learning that this was not a nice business, that I had to be very firm, very tough, and hold the line, really, because there was no game, no rules to this game when it came to even big name companies that will rip you off if your contract, if your money is not paid up front.
Right.
No money, no honey. Okay.
Well,
Yep.
Peggy, if you make any movies and you need distribution, I have a friend who coincidentally is in South Carolina and owns his own distribution company. And
cool.
distributed all the stores, Walmart's, Costco's, Best Buys, you name it.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes. Because, as I'm back home, and just those little stories to me, that they're like little common denominators that make a big difference.
Yeah.
And especially with people coming back. I had a premonition about this pandemic many years ago. And something said, get out of New York. You must have someplace else to go. And as I got down here, they were like, "Then you better watch out because they're going to be coming this way." And but it has been quite a journey, even coming kind of full circle. And so, yes, I do have some stories that I think would
Well,
I
that's
would
terrific.
really
Listen,
appreciate that. Yeah.
and if you get any premonitions about any lottery numbers, let us know.
Yeah.
We'd like to talk.
You have my phone number.
We'll be in touch.
My husband
Peggy, if anyone would like
does.
to, if anyone would like to know some more about you, where should they go?
I'm a very private person.
I know.
So, what'd you say?
I know you're on Instagram.
Well, I started this Instagram after my niece. I felt like I needed to share my legacy because, quite honestly, I started it when someone introduced me one day to someone else. I was standing there and they were like, "Oh, yeah, this is former so and so and so." And I was like, "Damn, did I die or something?" And I was like, excuse me, but please don't introduce me as former. I'm very present. You just don't know me. I know what I'm doing because I don't always want my competition to know what I'm doing.
Smart.
So for a long time, I felt like, why should I go on LinkedIn or whatever else to tell everybody what I'm doing? So I had a really kind of screwed up impression of social media after a few stalkers and things like this in life. So I've come kicking and screaming, to be honest with you, but I really felt compelled to tell my own story a little bit and share my legacy with this generation of kids that do look up to me or who are curious, because God knows they don't know anybody 20 years older than them, So it's like you've had your time, but fortunately, Instagram allows you to resurrect yourself. And I was like, this is brilliant. I like this.
Resurrecting me.
So, yeah, why not? But it's not only that. Besides an editorial or magazine or someone else, you're allowed to basically tell your own story, be a little more self-determined, and correct some of the lies that are told about you.
Good point.
Because I remember doing interviews for magazines, and it would come out, and I'm like, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. But this is so like in your face. It's so, I'm normally not this vocal on, I just like you to. But ordinarily I could be very gay, so, but yeah, it has definitely brought me out and has allowed me to connect, especially with other artists and collaborate and just feel a part of the world. It's really wonderful. And it started for me long before COVID. I was doing productions from here, even on my cell phone sometimes, because I don't like to be on set.
Yeah.
And, just learning to work from a distance, short of anything to get up on a plane, because I just don't like to fly.
Yeah.
I'm a driver. I'm a roadster, and so you can't beat it for that. You can't beat it for connecting with an old boyfriend that you never thought you'd ever see again, and laughing because he looks like a creep. No, or feeling, the beauty of our foundation has been collaborating with. We had 3 interns graduate. This is our second year, and to be able to give out scholarships to 3 people meant a lot to me, and to be able to work with them through the pandemic when they were depressed, when they were sick in some instances, when they couldn't even get back in the country, trying to help their parents get them back on the last flight, things like this, and giving them hope in the midst of when they thought it was all like, oh God, I'm not going to be able to finish my, final year. So being able to sit and conceptualize and go, no, we have to keep producing. You don't think that I modeled only when someone gave me a job. You created on your own. You had to always be conceptualized and have your own ideas. So we were able to do that, I feel, and keep them inspired and keep them seeing that you come through the storm together, that you're not isolated. You have to. So it's just really been an honor to give back. I sent out some checks this morning, and I tell you, I really did feel very proud. It wasn't, as they say, gargantuous amount of money, but it meant a lot to be able to give back and to say, that this is part of my legacy too.
Awesome.
Yeah, my mom was about education she was that lady that you'll see her on my page, but I was just in the first grade when the senior class of the last Black high school that we went to dedicated the yearbook to my mother as a mother of the community.
What an honor.
And she didn't work there. They just did it as the mother of the community.
Wow.
And it's such a beautiful tribute. You can pull it up and read it closely on my page. It's on there. But I feel like, you know, coming through such an iconic person, that there was that point when I had to give everything up to say, let me know, I would bathe your feet. I would take care of you. I will dress you, even if, you know, before your burial, I would do what a daughter's supposed to do, because nothing meant anything more to me than that, was to see her in comfort and to experience Alzheimer's and all of that, to experience menopause, to experience being a great, 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 great aunt. I am very blessed to, I think, be here now, healthy, and with a man that I probably could bet my money on every day of the week.
Nice.
So I feel like I win the lottery every day I wake up with him.
That's lovely.
Well, Peggy, thank you
And we
so,
have a little
so
dog.
much. Thank you so much
It's
for
been an
Oh,
honor.
thank you for thinking about me. I'm
us today.
thrilled to meet you two. I really am.
And we love the idea of people learning more about your legacy and your present and your past.
Well, it is my dream to finally, hopefully, get the story out the can, but I've been writing my own story. I'm a little bit of Tina Turner, that I feel like I've got to tell it myself.
Nice.
And I do want other people's voices in it, because it is amazing to me that people in the same room and they see things from a different perspective. So I want to hear the good, bad, and the ugly. And like this guy said to me a couple of years ago, he put a book out about iconic models. And he said he had interviewed all the top models. And I said, wow, I didn't remember interviewing for that. And he said, well, who are you? And what have you ever done? And I said, okay, that's it. That's it. Pull those trunks out from under the bed. And one thing you can't take away from me is I tell the kids now, because they're so good at hype. They can hype everything. But I said, but you got to have receipts.
Right.
Those photos, and I didn't realize that I had so many. When I started scanning, I was like, wait a minute, this is a job. I can't feed Instagram all day. So I'm working on that story. Yes.
Looking forward to it.
And I'd love to help you with the distribution when it's ready.
And cook, well, you know, there's got to be a little cooking up in there too. Most of my locations, I forgot that I used to cook for the crew. I just enjoy cooking. And if I'm in other countries, I'm always learning how to make things they make. So I can make some good sushi. We had sushi today, actually. And that's what my husband said during this pandemic. He said, I forgot that you know how to make a lot of different. I said, I'll take you around the world and never have to leave out.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you for inviting us into your lovely home or outside your home.
Have a wonderful evening.
Take care,
Yeah,
Peggy.
next time I'll take you inside.
We look forward to that.
Huh?
Sounds great.
We look forward to that.
Okay, well, I could take you now, but I don't want to bore
Almost
you.
past our bedtime.
It's okay.
Yes, all right. Well, I'll talk to you soon, and all the best, okay?
Thank
You too,
as
Peggy.
well.
Thanks again.
All
Bye.
right. Good night.
Good night. Bye. Thank you for listening to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review Podcast.
Uncovered was produced by Morley Schulman, with music by David Renda and logo design by Alan Lipman.
So remember, if you liked Uncovered, be sure to tell 2 friends about it.
And they'll tell 2 friends.
And so on, and so on, and so on.